Yeah, let's record it. Now, when I took over the chairmanship of this committee, I do recall assigning the meeting minute taking to somebody. Does anybody remember who I did that to, Kate?
Pretty sure it wasn't me.
I have no idea. I think you volunteered to do it.
I think you
I
did.
think, no, I don't think I did. I think I
That's how I
assigned
remember.
it to somebody. I think Kate knows.
Are you saying it's me?
I believe it is. Wasn't that the swap? Last time I put them together, because Chris gave me some notes on it. But it'd be great if you could help me out with that so I can focus on running the meeting. Is that possible?
I can do it this
Please?
time, and we need to trade around.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll rotate around. So 11th of March. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is a discussion on the residential tax exemption. So the last we left it off, we had presented a motion, I believe, to the select board to investigate the possibility of providing this incentive to property owners in town. Select board members, have you heard anything? Have you followed up on it? Because I believe we made the motion in a joint session. Is that right?
I have no recollection of that.
No recollection of the motion. So I've
I
got
wasn't
the
there at that joint meeting.
Okay,
I
I've got the
believe.
motion in front of me. So perhaps we have not presented this to the select board. I remember doing this. Do I have a date on this? Let me see if I have a date on when I drew it. So let's try to make this meeting a sort of review meeting. It's been a year.
Yeah.
Since we started doing this. And yeah, the motion was drawn on January 16th is when we put it together. So perhaps we should ask Mark to put this on the agenda. And what's the procedure for making this motion? Do we have to do it in joint session?
Probably not.
So the procedure would be for the select board to make this motion at one of your meetings and have the town manager and the assistant town manager explore this possibility. Is that right?
Yes. That
Is
makes
this the
sense
one-
to me.
Is this the one that Michael's been pushing for years?
No, this is an affordable housing tax incentive.
So how would that work?
Well, we reviewed it. I've got the documents that we've been reviewing.
I'm old and my memory's going.
I could read it to you if you want. I could read the motion let me read the motion. So the motion reads, the Housing Subcommittee is recommending that the following plans be reviewed and legislated by legislation be drafted by staff. Properties leased to tenants that are residents of Great Barrington and within certain percentage of AMI, and in parentheses, we are suggesting between 40 and 120 AMI, should either pay no increase in taxes for new construction and or receive a decrease in current tax value on the portion of property being rented. There would be an annual application filed with the tax assessor to verify ownership, inspection, lease agreement, tenant income, etc. 2, all properties rented long-term and occupied by someone who does not qualify for the above less than 120 AMI, the property will not be assessed for tax purposes for 2 cycles or 6 years. And then the motion reads, I move that town staff work to draft language describing this proposal for discussion and inclusion in the warrant for the 2020 ATM. So that's the motion.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so do we need to make a motion here within our committee to have the select board members present this to the select board at the next meeting.
Sure. So moved.
Second.
Second by Kate. Great. So we'll do a roll call vote, which, by the way, I didn't do a roll call attendance, which maybe
Wait, is there discussion?
Sure, there's a motion on the table with a second, so there is room for discussion.
So I have a question. So I have a house in Housatonic that I rent, and it's currently occupied by, depending on the week, either 3 or 4 dancers. And it's a long-term lease. They're paying $1,800 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And I'm virtually certain that they're all would qualify as being, below those standards for AMI. They're all working part-time. They don't make any money as dancers. How would that impact that house?
But wouldn't it be the exemption kick in to the leaseholder? So in other words, do you put the lease to your tenants in all 3 of their names?
Yes.
So then I suppose if all 3 of them can prove that they're under AMI, then you would qualify.
And so what would the benefit to me be?
That you would have a reduced tax. Let's see, the motion read, you would pay no increase in taxes for new construction and or receive a decrease in current tax value on the portion of property being rented. So that decrease can be a fixed sum, for example, that the select board can vote on, similar to the residential tax exemption that Provincetown enacted, or it could be some other percentage that either we as a joint committee discuss and propose.
Okay.
Is this going to run into any conflict with state regulations on real estate tax and that sort of thing? Does anyone know?
I think
I-
we'll
I-
have to approve it in a tax classification hearing, so it may not be something that starts immediately.
Well, it's not a tax classification option.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would probably have to be
I-
Attorney General.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that it likely would go into the town bylaws and it would be something that would be approved by the AG. That's what I would think.
Yeah,
Pretty sure Provincetown needed special state legislation.
I think they did.
Yeah, I think they did a,
But that's for their property tax exemption, not the affordable housing exemption, right?
they
Has-
did.
Has
Hold
another
on,
town
I have
done?
it. I have it somewhere.
You have what?
Michael
The
Wise and I
Provincetown?
spoke about the Provincetown and how they went about doing it. And so I'm pulling that up to try to find.
Right, but just remember there's a difference, right? Because what we're proposing
what
is
I'm
an
trying to
affordable
find. Thank
housing.
you. I'm
Did
trying to find what the
they-
difference is.
Well,
So
I've got
here's
I have the Provincetown residential exemption in front of me.
right. May I
think the
share the process
sure.
that so this was Michael Wise's
Okay,
response. Provincetown has a home rule petition law that adds an item to the legislative language about the residential exemption. In the Provincetown version of the law, subparagraph is a basic exemption of up to 35% of the value of an owner's principal resident, which is identical to the general applicable state law. The town's new language about rentals is subparagraph 2, authorizing a similar exemption for a residential parcel occupied by a resident of the town of Provincetown, other than the taxpayer, occupied on a year-round basis and used as his or her principal residence for income tax purposes, provided that the town may adopt and amend criteria to determine who qualifies as a resident under the act. And then they started in 2015. They have another rental exemption program, which was, this I think is what you has, which was also the product of a home rule petition in 2002. This specifically targets year-round affordable housing, no taxes due on property rented year-round at a rate below a specific maximum to tenants whose income is below a specific maximum. It is my recollection that few properties have taken advantage of this break, which has to be applied for annually. So that answers your question, I think.
It doesn't really answer the question of how we get it approved or how we get it through, whether or not it has to go through
It
some
seems
kind
as
of
though it needs a
legislative
home
review
rule.
or.
It seems as though it needs a home rule petition, which I think can still happen during an annual town meeting. It just can't be it's going to be an item. From what I'm reading, from what Michael has said when he has spoken to people from Provincetown, is that it's listed, it can be an item on the annual town meeting, but it has it's a home rule petition as opposed to just a general bylaw change. And I don't know how that changes how it's handled at town meeting.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, that may be right. If it's a home rule petition, then town meeting can pass it and petition the legislature. If you guys pass it out of the subcommittee, staff will figure it out.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
let's.
Chris, can you help me out with home rule petition? What is a home rule petition?
It's special state legislation. You're petitioning the state to let you do something special that other municipalities in the state generally do not do.
And is that something that the government of the town can propose, or does it need citizens, signatures and support?
Yes, the government can propose it, but it needs to be passed by the legislature, which is town meeting.
Okay. All right, so we can do it, potentially.
I'm just going to step away for a few minutes.
Okay.
Sure.
He's having.
So any more thoughts?
He's
No,
having some birthday cake, I think.
At 10:15?
Champagne.
What's wrong with this town hall?
Well, it's his birthday. Come on, Kate.
It's a coffee break.
It's a coffee break.
All
Okay,
right.
so we should vote. Oh, sorry.
I have one thing that I just thought of, right? So let's say we do get review from staff and the assessor determines that that there's a sort of, I don't know, a threshold at which the exemption would cause the town too much of a tax burden. I don't know how we would determine this, but I just had this thought of this being a sort of program that people can opt into, and that there's limits to how many people we can accept into the program.
Why would
Any
you
thoughts?
limit the access to a program that tries to ensure affordable housing?
I don't
Well,
think
the only
that's our
reason,
responsibility to figure out. Like, I
right?
think
I don't think so.
something-
I don't
I don't
think
think
so
that's even a
either.
conversation we need to be having. I think that's something that the staff can present us. I think the hardest thing is we don't have an assessor right now.
Yeah, the only reason I bring it up is because if we do get some kickback from staff saying that the potential burden would be too great on the tax rolls, then perhaps we would consider a limit of, I don't know, 50. I forgot how many rental units we have in town, but if we had a limit or something, I don't know, just something I was thinking of. I don't get a lot of positive vibes from you guys about that.
I don't think we'd ever hit 50.
No, I also don't.
Yeah,
think-
that's what I know.
I don't think that's something we need to discuss
I
now.
was just throwing it out there just in case.
I think if we hit 10, we could celebrate.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'd call the question.
right. So I got the table to move to have the select board before us at select board meeting.
Okay, I couldn't
Any
quite
further
hear
discussion on the
the
motion?
entire motion, but
You're breaking up.
All right, we'll
Pedro.
take a roll call vote, John.
Sure, aye.
And now you're
Yeah,
locked.
sorry, I don't know what's going on. I was getting a call and my fiber optic sometimes isn't that great over here for some reason. So the motion before us is to have select board members of this subcommittee read our motion for an affordable housing tax incentive at their next meeting.
The next available meeting, how about?
Yes, the next
Our
available
next
select
meeting-
board meeting.
The agenda's pretty full already.
Well, you could do this during, you know, at the beginning of your meetings when they ask if, why not? Why can't you do when they ask you if you have anything to discuss?
It's really more of an agenda item.
You think, really?
Yeah, I do.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can't just
Okay,
throw that out there.
okay.
So
Well-
next available
Well,
agenda.
If you can send me the language that you have, Pedro, I will send it to Mark and see where he can fit it in on the agenda.
Okay. All right, I'll send it to you. So we have a motion. Do we have any further discussion at the next available meeting? All right, I'll take a vote, a roll call vote then. John,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye as well. So we'll send this to you guys and we'll send it to Mark as well. I'll send this to you, Kate, since you volunteered to send it to Mark. Okay, let's move on. So, okay, so we have the affordable housing, we did that, the residential tax exemption, review and comment on that. Do we want anything on that? I know that this is something that Michael's been trying to push through. Do we want to bring this back? Do we think this is a good idea? Is there support on this committee to pursue this?
I've always
I mean,
pretty much thought it was a good idea.
You what?
I pretty much always thought it was a good idea.
Okay.
I thought that it wasn't particularly because it's really designed more for a place like Provincetown that has very few year-round residents.
I think I would like to personally see how we come out the other side of this pandemic before it's something that we start pursuing. And, you know, we have a lot of businesses that have been hard hit. I don't think I like the idea of making anything more difficult for them right in the moment. But I can't say I think it's a bad idea. I just think the timing is off.
Yeah.
So how would this be more difficult on businesses? Would it potentially put more of a tax burden on them?
Doesn't it? You have to, in order to have a residential tax exemption, you have to have a commercial and property tax split before you can do a residential exemption. It wouldn't necessarily mean, I guess it wouldn't necessarily mean that the taxes on commercial have to go up, but that's typically what ends up happening because the business owners aren't always town members. So town meeting would probably push to have residential property taxes go down and commercial property go up because that's typically what happens once a split happens. I'm not saying that's what would happen. I'm not saying that this is a bad idea. I just think that trying to pursue it right now doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
And most commercial properties are leased triple net. So that means that the tenants are paying the taxes.
Right.
So if you have a restaurant that's closed, your taxes will go up.
Yeah.
And the taxes will go up to make up the difference. Is that what you guys are saying?
No, not necessarily. So you have a split, you'll have to split residential and commercial. And then the residential will get split based on the property value. Typically what ends up happening once you split is residential starts to go down because those people are voters in town where property owners of commercial spaces and the businesses that preside in them are not necessarily residents of Great Barrington. They don't have a vote. So then this starts to happen and commercial grows up and then the residential will also split based on it. it's not a bad thing, but I just think the timing is not right.
You know, the gain is with the people in the least expensive houses in town, whether they have a lot of assets or not. They're the ones that get most of the advantage. Second homeowners kind of get hammered.
Well, the way I understand that when the Provincetown exemption works is that they have an exemption amount every year that they base on, I guess, a mean of the property valuations in the town, and that everybody is eligible for that amount of exemption.
Right.
Right. So they can opt in. Right now it's 25%, and the maximum amount you can take out is 172,414. So what I don't understand right now about the exemption is how in the world they could afford to, to lose, $1,500 per property
Because
on average.
Because if you're above the mean, your property taxes go up.
Right. You raise the tax like from 15 points to 17 or 18 points. But then you exempt, I mean, if you got somebody with a $200,000 house and you exempt 175,000, they're paying taxes on 25,000. If you got a $900,000 house, you're paying taxes on most of it at a higher rate.
Yeah, I guess that's where I don't understand why it's a higher rate, because I think it's an opt-in. It's not required, so you could just pay the residential rate. It's not. It's a complete shift.
Yeah.
And so what, you would take that 25% of your property, discount that from the property value, and pay taxes on that?
They don't do a percentage generally. It's generally a fixed amount.
Yeah, these guys have, it says.
They did a special provision.
Exemption amount is based on the average assessed residential value times the percentage voted by the select board at the annual classification hearing, not to exceed 35%.
Right, but
that fixed amount. Okay, so that fixed amount is. So if you have $1 million house in Provincetown, you get to deduct $175,000 to its value, to its assessed value, and you pay taxes on that.
Yeah.
But the rate has gone up. So the new rate is, instead of 15, it's 17 or 18. So even though you're paying not the full value of your home, you're still paying more than you would have paid beforehand.
Right.
And so if your home is worth more than the average assessed value, then you're paying more taxes every year.
Yes.
And why does that necessarily hamper second homeowners?
Because second homeowner property becomes a commercial property.
No.
It does? Why?
No.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
No.
Oh, I thought it did.
No.
Oh.
Commercial property stays commercial. You can have the commercial rate and the residential rate be the same.
Right.
And then it's just based on the value.
So the issue with the commercial properties is that they're generally valued at a higher rate.
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Right. So they will absorb more of the increase in taxes because the rate is going to go up overall. But there's a number that cuts it off, like maybe 200,000 or something, 150,000, something like that. You don't pay any taxes on that part of your value.
Right.
But you pay more tax on the rest of it. So somebody that has a $200,000 house, you deduct 150 or even 200,000, they're not going to pay any taxes at all, really, even with the higher rate. They're going to pay a lot less taxes. People with more valuable properties pay more in tax.
See, what I don't get with what you're saying, Bill, is the rate, because the rate stays the same.
No.
It's the rate per thousand. It's just that you pay more towards the value of your home.
No, the tax rate, you increase the tax rate. That's the whole point. You increase the tax rate from 15 to 18 points.
Depending on what your property is worth
No, for everybody.
for
The tax
everybody.
rate goes up for everybody, including both commercial and residential. The whole rate goes up. But there's a cutoff. I would say 200,000. Let's just say 200,000. Anybody that has a property that's worth less than 200,000 will essentially be paying zero in tax.
Right.
Anybody that has property that's worth more than that will be paying the increased rate on that property.
Do you have any idea how that rate is determined? That increased rate?
I did it one time. There's a formula for it, but I don't remember it.
Is it based on anything that's sort of on the ground? In other words, anything that's, let's say that the threshold is at 200,000, or let's just say in our town is 300,000.
That's
Is
probably
it based on how many properties are below that and above that to kind of make up for any losses?
There is some sort of formula, I think, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
Okay.
I'm sure Michael
So-
Wise.
Well, maybe next time we'll have him to come and explain it clearly to us. Because I could see how he would have a difficult time explaining this to a town meeting audience, let alone a select board audience. Is there any further discussion? Doesn't seem like there's a lot of will to pursue this at this point. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then we'll just move on to our next item. The next item we have here is rental inspection ordinance review and comment. Okay, so I apologize for not getting to this earlier or getting you an example of what I'm talking about, but I'll give you a little background as to why I brought this up. So I am on a housing committee that's organized by BRPC, and we get together every few months. We're trying to put together a sort of policy that's Berkshire wide for housing to have to be able to present to the legislature and discuss, issues that are affecting us and things we want to talk about. I think, Bill, you're familiar with what we're doing.
Is this,
And so at one of our meetings, sorry, Kate.
It's okay,
At
go
one of our meetings, somebody brought up this idea of a rental inspection ordinance. And Chris let me know that Williamstown has a rental inspection ordinance. And so what the ordinance does basically, it does the thing, okay, what it does basically is that I'll say that it mandates people who have rental properties to have their properties inspected by the Board of Health for compliance. Okay. My thought and interest in discussing the possibility of having this type of ordinance in our town was that it would allow us to have sort of accurate data on rental properties in our town.
Yeah.
How they're being used, the size of them, how many there are. My first question to the woman who brought it up at the meeting was, how do you get people to sign up for this thing? And she just says, people, actually the board there was consensus among the board members that people who rent properties will sign up for them because they will want their properties to be, to get the green light from the Board of Health so that they'll be easier to rent and so forth. I don't know if that's true. I've sent you guys the Williamstown regulation. I'll just say, I'll give it to you. We'll discuss it at our next meeting. You can review it. I will say that it's got a bit in it where it does not mandate short-term rentals, but I would obviously want to strike that out and just make it for all rentals in town if we decide to do it. The purpose here is, it's kind of clandestine, right? Because we're kind of doing surveillance on our population in a way. And I don't, it's not really the purpose. The purpose for us is to really get or at least from my point of view, to get some sense of how rental units are being divvied up in town.
Yeah. What about enforcement? How do they do that? How do they handle that?
Board of Health.
Right, but I mean, if somebody's renting out an apartment in their house or something, I mean, they don't want to report it because it's
Right.
lead paint and bugs or whatever. I don't know.
I brought this up at the meeting, and they, there was consensus in that meeting that people sign up for it.
It struck me in reading, I just read the first page of the Williamstown thing. It strikes me as being very onerous to the landowner, because, there's a time frame when you have to do this, and I've never had a vacancy. It's always been just word of mouth, and when one tenant leaves, the next day someone else moves in.
Right.
I don't have any Board of Health issues. I'm not worried about the Board of Health inspecting it, but the way it's written, you can't do that because you have to give them 7 days to inspect it, and they won't inspect it. You can't file until after your tenant has left. It's counterintuitive. If you're trying to increase the affordability or the access to housing, this doesn't do it. It's just the opposite.
Well, my thought is kind of twofold. Again, it's not really, and I'm not proposing Williamstown's ordinance. I would just give it to you as an example. So if there is a desire to have this type of ordinance, we can obviously rewrite it. My idea was obviously to get the data that we're so sorely kind of missing and that we all want to get, and that the town itself, has they abide by a housing code. There's a pamphlet on the Board of Health website about it. It conforms, and also that our town has to conform to this Chapter 11 within the state bylaws for housing safety and those types of things. So it's not a necessarily bad thing to have your house kind of checked out and make sure. I mean, it kind of, to some homeowners, it might even be helpful because they might not even know that they're in violation of some things. So I don't think it's a terrible idea, but again, I don't know how you get people to sign up for it.
What data are you trying to collect?
Short-term rentals, the stuff that you're super
Is
interested
it
in.
to short-term rentals, or is it to
No,
all rental properties?
Well, it would go to all rental properties, but in effect, if we get all rental properties, we'll get that information that we're looking for.
The short-term rentals in that, so every time they have somebody stay for a weekend, they have to have it inspected afterwards, or is it an annual inspection?
It's annual.
Yeah.
Again, I've given you guys an example of something. We could write it however we want. I would say that if somebody who's doing BRPO, whatever, they could have it inspected once a year. I think somebody who has a tenant there for 3 years can have it inspected when their tenant leaves, that kind of thing.
I mean, I don't think it's bad. And I think when we spoke about the incentive for the affordable housing, we talked about having that inspected so that we're not giving people incentive to have slum, places. And I think that's really important. I know when I first started a discussion with the town about short-term rental and trying to regulate them in some way, there was a lot of concern. I mean, the state legislation was originally written that they had to be annually inspected by the Board of Health and a building inspector. And there was so much pushback from small towns that they just didn't have the human, they didn't have the manpower to make that kind of inspection happen. So I think that if we're going to continue to have this conversation, we should probably bring in the Board of Health or our health agent to see if this is something that they're capable of handling.
I could tell you that out here, and I'm downtown right now, but these streets like Pleasant and Dresser that are full of little rental units, there's some hardcore rental apartments in these areas that could probably use this type of thing for their tenants. I'm not sure that I know people just upstairs from me that don't know that they have tenants, that there's basically a tenant's bill of rights in the state of Massachusetts, and they're living in conditions that would not meet those rights. So on that level, I don't think it's a terrible idea either, because there are some landlords here that are just not keeping their properties up.
So do the landlords sign up for it or the tenants?
the landlords would have to.
So if they're not keeping their property up, why would they do that?
I know, this is the thing, because, you know,
Let's watch.
I
Let's
get-
watch it. Let's watch what happens in Williamstown and some of the other places, and get info about how well people are signing up for it and how much response they're getting. And if we feel like it's actually successful in collecting data and having, you know, things inspected on a regular basis, then we should try to adopt something similar. But otherwise, I think it's a real waste of time if we don't think that it's going to enhance those things, and I'm not sure that it will. And
well, I'll say that the Williamstown law went into effect in '96, and they've been, you know, using it ever since. And I'll ask again, and I'll reach out to the delegates from Williamstown and ask them. But they say that people sign up for it. The whole town is practically signed up for it, and that it's not an issue, and that it's been a positive thing for them. So I'll double check with them.
All right. Is there a penalty if you
Just
are renting
looking.
something out and you don't sign up?
Again,
says
that's
the
it's not
fine-
specified in their regulations, but
Mhm.
again, it's.
I mean, it seems to me if your goal is to collect data, you already have a mandate from the state that the assessor has to reassess every property within 3 years. Every single property in town has to be reassessed every 3 years. So why not use that as a vehicle?
We've tried. I think we've tried. We've asked. Hasn't happened. I think that for me, again, the goal is twofold. One is to get that information, but also to bring up some of these rentals, rental properties up to the code. I mean, I think it benefits. Again, it benefits the landlord, despite the fact that they're getting away with it. It will benefit them because they're subject to lawsuits. If these tenants, like if I go out and I start petitioning all those tenants and the tenants upstairs, you know, with all this information that they don't know, those landlords are going to be, you know, screwed. They're going to be
they
embroiled
might
in
not.
lawsuits.
The people living there may be in situations where they may not be documented, maybe not specifically in your building, but in other buildings. And I think that puts them in a really awkward position too. I mean, some of these people that are living in these really poor living conditions, and I'm not saying that that's right, but they don't have a lot of options, and they certainly can't sue their landlord. And I think we have to be really careful as we pursue something like this to make sure that these people that are just scraping by, that live in Great Barrington, aren't being penalized for this.
And also the lowest rents are presumably are the crappiest units. And if you force the landlord to upgrade, those rates are going to go up.
Yeah, or those people are going to be living in the hotels, you know, or this in their car because they're going to get evicted by the town potentially. I don't
It
think
sounds like what we have here is a failure of capitalism is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, but that's
Not the
what we can
price.
fix right now, unfortunately.
I mean,
I'm not saying that this isn't a bad idea. It'd be great for these
Right.
buildings to be safe places for tenants to be in, but I think we have to think of all the lowest common denominators as we start to pursue something like this, because we certainly don't want to put people that are already out more out.
all right, doesn't sound like there's a lot of support for this idea, so we'll just move on. So, Kate, I believe you brought up this youth building program. Do you have anything on that?
I don't have anything more to share. I think it was in the talk that we had about getting, the Habitat for Humanity, the property, and trying to get, more young people trained in carpentry and plumbing and electricians, because there is such a need for that kind of work. And it was a program that I know about because a friend of mine's husband, when we were in college, ran this program, and they have them all around the world. I think I sent you guys all a link to it. I don't know if it's the right fit. And I do know of a couple of other organizations that are kind of looking at doing something similar. But
I know a little bit about, I looked into that at some point. We just really don't have the population for it.
right, that's what I'm thinking. I mean,
Pittsfield,
maybe
it works
Pittsfield,
fine.
right.
Habitat does have sort of a youth build kind of thing that they are working with kids on, bringing
Yeah,
people into the trades. Green Acres is also working with somebody else. I forget who, but they're
that's what I was going to say. Green Acres.
yeah, they're developing a program like that as well.
Yeah. So I think it'll happen. It's just not maybe right away. So I kind of felt like it, you know, we didn't fit the criteria, but I think having similar programs as we look to create more affordable housing, especially through the means that the town might be able to provide, to use it as an opportunity.
It'd be a great way to build ADUs.
Yeah.
Or to do housing rehabs, you know, for people who get those kinds of grants. I know we had a program in town at one point for that. Chris, maybe you can refresh us about that. But you know, if the town is giving out grants, why wouldn't we have some support for labor as well?
The grants are really complicated. They have to be,
Yeah.
it's federal funds and state funds. You need to use prevailing wage and all that good stuff.
Oh, okay.
So it cuts out that kind of local youth build program.
It's a failure of
Unless they're
democracy in
paying
this
them
case.
prevailing wage, you know, $50 for a plumber.
Right.
If you could find a plumber for $50,
Right.
I assure you that's not the prevailing wage.
My plumber just left. I have no idea what I just paid him.
Yeah.
With more
More
than
than
$50.
$50 an hour, I can guarantee you.
I've gotten pretty good at plumbing over the winter. If anybody needs any assistance around the home.
That's illegal.
I won't put it in the notes.
Okay, well, with that, then we have citizens speak. I only see one citizen out there. Well, I see two citizens out there. Chris, do you see any hands up?
Who's the unidentified one?
It's Eileen and Eileen's phone.
Oh,
Okay.
So there's two citizens essentially.
she takes up so much room. I don't know.
All right, so before I adjourn, the only thing that we have accomplished today is to have a motion read for the affordable housing tax exemption review at the next available select board meeting. So without objection, I will adjourn us at 10:45.
See you all in a year.
Yep.
For our next annual meeting.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye.